This video is brought to you by mybookie.ag. What's up, guys? We got some boxing matches going on Triller, and you know how these usually go. What I could say are the matches are pretty interesting, I guess. We got some older legends, 3 former UFC champions. We got Silva versus Tito Ortiz, and Evander Holyfield fighting Vitor Belfort. That main event is something I never thought I would ever say in a million years. I would love to see what USADA would find in this boxing card, because frankly, Vitor has transformed yet again. TRT has been infused. Tito Ortiz also looks in fantastic shape. Evander Holyfield looks in fantastic shape. Anderson looks like Anderson. I don't know what Dr. Vitor is going to, but man, he had a clientele for this weekend's card. And I will have to say, it is pretty nostalgic to see these guys on stage together, on a card together. I mean, man, Habib would be livid if he saw this clip. Too many ring card girls for him. Anderson, Tito, and Vitor, those are the legends of MMA. Crazy to think that they're all going to be competing. It's crazy to see that Tito is fighting Anderson of all people, and he's already throwing some shade at Anderson's style. Tito's an old school guy, as is Anderson, but Anderson has incorporated more modern techniques into his game, whereas Tito likes to stick to the old basics. He's not with all that flashiness, and it's going to be interesting to see how he comes up against Anderson when he's going to be using the Wing Chun and Bruce Lee tactics that Tito Ortiz has shot down, because it was Bruce Lee's philosophy to mix up styles and incorporate the ones that work, even if it's modern or old. Tito's actually practicing the opposite. He's practicing against that teaching, knocking a style from Anderson that's been very successful for a long time. It would be the most hilarious and saddest thing in the world if Vitor just spontaneously threw a wheel kick at Evander Holyfield, like the TRT possesses him and you see him spin. If I'm going to be honest here, I think it would have made a lot more sense for Evander Holyfield to fight Tito Ortiz and Anderson fight Vitor. The way they match this up now, the two fights seem too one-sided. Evander and Tito would have been a more competitive fight, in my opinion, and Anderson and Vitor would be a more competitive fight. But here's what we have to say, man. Now, I do believe both fights are going to be pretty easy to predict. When we jump into that co-main event, Anderson Silva is taking a big step down in competition by fighting Tito. They're both the same age, they're both 46 years old, and they're both roughly the same size. I would say Tito is a little bit bigger than him, but Tito is a wrestler. He knocked out Chuck Liddell, maybe he got some confidence after that, and I have to give credit where it's due. Even in some of his most recent MMA fights, his striking has gotten a little bit better in technique. At least he's a lot more patient when he throws punches. His defense is not all there. He's still pretty slow, but he's in very good shape for his age, thanks to Vitor. But I definitely could see Tito Ortiz going the long haul in the fight. But that's not going to be much of an impact because Anderson could do the same thing. Anderson fought Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. in his last boxing fight, a former boxing world champion, 11 years younger than him, a guy who was much more active than Anderson and Tito have been, and Anderson won almost every single round in a huge upset. Anderson looked pretty good for his age as well. Body-wise, not necessarily, but Anderson's never looked like a bodybuilder or something like that. You know, he's always had a very questionable physique. Here's the thing about Anderson Silva. He has aged better than most combat athletes I've ever seen. What 44-year-old is going to fight Israel Adesanya and actually give him some issues? What 40-year-old is going to go out there and beat Derek Brunson, or at least make it a competitive fight? What 46-year-old is going to enter a new sport and beat a former champion in pretty much his first fight? I mean, he's had 2 other before, but the competition level was completely different. An extraordinarily rare amount of fighters can fight at this level. There's Bernard Hopkins, maybe George Foreman, not a lot of guys out there, man. And Tito has not aged like Anderson has. In fact, nobody on this card has aged as well as Anderson Silva. We got to see how TRT Vitor looks before we make a final judgment on that, but as of what we've seen in their most recent fights, Anderson has aged the best out of everybody here. He's much faster than Tito. He's a better boxer than Tito entirely. He hits harder than Tito. He's longer than Tito. He's more athletic than Tito. Tito is very open to getting countered, and he's already knocking down some of the skills that Anderson comes into a fight with. He's knocking down the whole Wing Chun thing, and even though Anderson is one of the only fighters I've seen at MMA and in boxing to actually make it work in a fight against legit competition, his deflections and parrying are highly elite, even gave Adesanya some issues, who's one of the best strikers in the world in his prime. It's very hard to see anything that Tito Ortiz can actually do in this fight, and I 100% agree with the betting gods going into this. Anderson should be a massive favorite. He could do whatever he wants to Tito Ortiz. Tito's very slow from a distance. He reaches with the right hand, which is very open to getting countered by Anderson's long left or check right hook that he likes to go to these days. Anderson can establish a lot of things off of his jab. His movement to create those angles with his left straight are going to be detrimental as Tito is going to give him those natural openings. Tito is way behind the times when it comes to striking technique compared to Anderson Silva. So my prediction for this fight, I got to go with Anderson Silva, and I'm going to go by I could see a decision win, but to make it fun, I'm going to go by a 5th round TKO. It might go to a decision though. This fight would be a lot more competitive in MMA even today. And then we go to that main event, Evander Holyfield versus Vitor Belfort. Now, while Tito Ortiz should not be fighting someone like Anderson Silva, Evander Holyfield should not be fighting, period. Evander Holyfield is 58 years old. He's taken this fight on short notice, like a week or 2 weeks notice, as Vitor Belfort was supposed to fight Oscar De La Hoya initially. Evander took the offer, and I don't think it's out of excitement or passion. I have a feeling it's about the money. If you look at his training videos recently, he's just way too slow, and he's not fluid with his striking like he used to be, nor near even when he was competing out of his prime. And then you look at Vitor Belfort, and this guy's smashing mitts. I mean, the training videos has such an impact on the betting odds specifically, where Evander Holyfield was actually the favorite before those videos came out. He was a -120 favorite over Vitor Belfort. I told a lot of people, if you want to get into betting on this fight, you do it then, because now Evander is a 2-1 underdog. He went from a slight favorite to a 2-1 underdog. That much of a change. And not only that, he's not just fighting Vitor Belfort, he's fighting the transformation that wreaked havoc in the middleweight division for a short amount of time. The man who shattered Luke Rockhold's chin forever, the man who sent the invincible Dan Henderson airborne with an uppercut, and then became the first man to knock him out. The man who permanently disabled Michael Bisping with a high kick. Evander is not only fighting the human Vitor Belfort, he's fighting a mythical creature on Saturday. The only thing is that Vitor Belfort is in his early 40s. He's not going to be as dangerous as he used to be when he was in his mid-30s. But that TRT is going to kick in, and Evander Holyfield being at 58 years old, it's a bit sad if I'm going to be honest. Even though Evander is one of the greatest boxers of all time, very professional and technical in the ring. Everybody's human, everybody's got a time clock. And I don't care who you really are, 58-year-old, it's going to be tough to compete with even someone in their early 40s. It's just way too much of a gap in age. The older you get, the bigger the discrepancy gets. A 40-year-old can fight a 20-year-old, but it's going to be very hard for a 50-year-old to fight a 30-year-old or a 60-year-old to fight a 40-year-old. The older you get, the age discrepancy hits a lot harder in the fight. And even though Evander should be the more technical boxer, he should be the more boxing savvy, he has the better punches, he has the far better defense, he's good as a lead and counter fighter, he's one of the most well-rounded boxers the sport has ever seen. It doesn't really matter when the speed that Vitor is fighting on, with the power that he's able to generate, with the less brain damage that he has, being the more athletic guy in there, at a younger age, it's going to be very hard for Holyfield to fight off Vitor Belfort. I could see Evander clinching up with Vitor time after time to negate the action, neutralize anything that Vitor is going to try to explode with in order to slow down the fight and just get to that decision. And the answers he's been giving, the questions in the press conferences and interviews, it just sounds like Evander doesn't care to win. It just sounds like he's just trying to get paid out of this. And it just sounds like he's taking this fight very similar to the way Joe Louis took the fight against Rocky Marciano. Not the same kind of dynamic because Vitor's a little bit older and he's not a boxer, but it's the same motivation. It's the same reason. It seems like to me that Evander is taking this fight just to earn a little bit of money, doesn't care if he wins or loses. I hope that's not true. I hope he comes into this fight to win, because if he goes out there and wins and has his motivation in the right place, for him to be successful in the sport yet again, with all these celebrity fights going on and old guys unretiring, he has a lot of opportunities to make big fights again and make a bunch of money and have fun doing it. Run with his passion again. Now, Vitor's of course taking this for money as well, but he's not in the same situation that Evander Holyfield is in. Vitor still has that pride about him. He still has that fighting spirit in him. He wanted to do bare knuckle boxing. He wanted to do a bunch of things out here, and he said that he's been wanting to box for a very long time. They offered him contracts when he was younger, and he had to turn those down because he couldn't do MMA, and he wanted to make MMA bigger for Brazil and for America across the globe, in which he helped in doing so. So now he's chasing his other passion. Very similar to why Anderson is boxing. These two guys are rich. They don't need the money. Vitor and Anderson have it made for them. They don't need to ever fight again. But the fact that they're putting themselves in this kind of risk, right? Vitor was supposed to fight Oscar De La Hoya. That was not going to be an easy fight for him. It just shows that Vitor is in a better mental state than maybe Holyfield is in. So my prediction for this fight, I got to go with Vitor Belfort, and I'm going to go by a 4th round TKO. Yeah, man, this fight might be pretty rough to watch, but the betting odds are changing a lot. Evander Holyfield was the favorite 2 days ago. Now, Vitor is steadily growing as the favorite by the hour. And this card might be one of the best opportunities if you're going to go and bet on fights with mybookie.ag. Sometimes the freakier the fight, the more opportunity you get bet on the odds. For people who got in early on Vitor Belfort when Evander was the favorite, that might have been a huge steal, but it's still never too late. If you think that Vitor is going to win this fight and are confident in that, he might only grow to be a bigger favorite from here on out. So the earlier you make the bet, the better it's going to be for you. Anderson Silva seems like a locked in pick for a lot of people as well. So there's a possibility you can line up a parlay with Vitor and Anderson in order to maximize your earnings. David Haye is also a huge favorite in his fight. Three-way parlay is another way you can go. And MyBookie is also having a special promotion. You can go and bet on the lock of the season for the upcoming football game between the Dallas Cowboys and Tampa Bay Buccaneers. If any team scores there, you win. The best bet you can make is one that you can't lose. It's honestly that simple. Join MyBookie now and place a bet on the lock of the season. The first point scored means you automatically make cash. And with this easy win, you can also put it on a future UFC card. Just join now and use the promo code WEASEL to not only get into the lock of the season, but also double your first deposit instantly. That's promo code WEASLE to activate MyBookie's sign up offer. Visit mybookie.ag today where you bet, you win, and when you win, you get paid. And ultimately, guys, that's the end of the predictions. It's going to be a wild card. I'm actually kind of interested in it, kind of excited about it, and I'll see you guys in the podcast tomorrow.